Battle over the Second Amendment heating up again in the wake of 2 mass shootings in California and a nationwide crime crisis. Governor Gavin Newsom thinks the solution is to ban guns.
I mean, the Second Amendment is becoming a suicide pact.
But there's many people in this country that support the Second Amendment and are lawful gun owners.
Yeah, I have great respect. I have no ideological opposition to someone reasonably and responsibly owning firearms and getting background checks and being trained.
How did he get a gun that's illegal in the state of California?
Exactly. We'll figure it out. That's going to happen. There's never going to, you got to enforce laws. Things fall through the cracks, but it doesn't mean you give up.
And despite the push for a crackdown on firearms, California has some of the strictest gun control laws in the entire nation. And other blue areas that are tough on guns are not seeing reduced crime rates. A new study shows Democrat-run cities like Baltimore, Chicago, New York, and L.A. have some of the highest homicide rates, and a lot of those deaths are gun-related. Let's go to our favorite native Californian, Greg Gutfeld. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I don't trust anybody on gun control if they don't know the terms. You know what I mean?
I do.
It's a callback. And also those who refuse the agency of the criminal. It's like it's always the gun that's doing the killing, as if it's up on 2 little legs running down the street shooting people. I don't trust anybody who cannot tell the difference between a thug with a gun and a shopkeeper with a gun. That's a huge moral and intellectual flaw in any argument. Why is there no Second Amendment phobia, right? You're critical of anything on the left, it's a phobia. You know, radical Islam, Islamophobia. If you're critical of obesity, that's, what is that, fat phobic. If you think gender affirmation surgeries are bad, that's transphobic. We have a problem with defensophobia, right? People who fear lawful gun owners and besmirch them and try to take their rights away rather than face the real problem, which are the thugs with the guns.
One of the things that was kind of absurd about this is that the Democrats initially called for an immediate assault weapons ban, but the California shooter, the first one of them, used a handgun to do his killing.
Yeah, it was like a 9mm MAC-10, kind of like a poor man's Uzi. I guess it had an extended clip, 30 rounds. I don't know if it was modified to shoot automatic, but you see those things in like a Steven Seagal movie from the 80s. I mean, this isn't real. It's not even an assault weapon under their definition of an assault weapon. And he better watch his mouth if he wants to run for president. You can't say the Second Amendment is a suicide pact. If he was here, I would have had him run that analogy by me, because that is such an inflammatory statement. And you're right. He doesn't know how to talk about it, because I don't think he's ever shot a weapon. I Googled Gavin Newsom hunting. You cannot find a photo of Gavin Newsom holding a gun. Now, Democrats, if it's Kerry, if it's Gore, if it's Clinton, Barack Obama, remember the photo shoot with him and the I mean, even Joe Biden talks about, I have shotguns. You have to at least go to the range once to just be able to talk about it, to have that experience as an American, to respect the Second Amendment. Because if you don't respect the Second Amendment, you don't respect the founders, our rights, the pioneers, the police. You have to have that experience. And I don't think he has that experience. And that's why he's so reckless with his language. And he never talks about crime. He only talks about mass shootings. There's homicides all the time. There's 2,000 homicides a year in California. Doesn't talk about those, only talks about mass shootings, because he's soft on crime and he's tough on guns, because it's easier to be tough on guns. Hard, because it takes commitment to be tough on crime.
Harold, what about some creative thinking about going after the problem of the gun violence rather than just the gun? I mean, it's as if they just double down on the laws that they already have. As we pointed out, a lot of these cities have very strict gun laws. And as Norah O'Donnell asked the governor, he says, yeah, we don't know how we got the illegal gun.
So I think you're right. The premise of your question is the gun laws we have in a lot of these states and a lot of these cities are not achieving the aim end that we want, or the end that I think all of us want. And you may assign it just to Democrats, but I don't think anyone wants mass shootings. I don't think anyone wants the kind of violence we see in communities, the cities that you put up, and for that matter, other cities, including our home city here in New York. So if you have to push the reset button and start over, we should. I would ask everybody around the table, and for that matter, those who, first off, we agree we don't want mass shootings, and we want to try to eliminate gun violence in communities where kids are getting shot and drive-bys are happening. So how do we do that? We need more police officers. Most police organizations support gun control laws or some more stricter gun control laws that we have, including big police chiefs all across the country, because they have to deal with it firsthand. But I'm a Second Amendment guy, and I believe that. I don't think that anyone, I would not have used the word suicide pact, but I understand his passion. So I think everybody should take a step back, and I would encourage Congressman Comer, the chair of the Oversight Committee, this might be some area to exercise some oversight in, to tell mayors, look, your plans aren't working, your laws are not working, your laws are not working. Let's push the reset button. I want to help you figure out how we reduce these killings and these mass shootings. And hopefully we can come to some agreement, because what we have now isn't working.
And Judge, is there something about not prosecuting the laws that are on the books?
That's exactly the issue. Everybody's sitting here talking about the laws. If the laws aren't enforced, there's not going to be an end to crime, whether it's petty larceny or whether it's murder or homicide by a handgun or by an Uzi, or some kind of machine gun. One of the things you said, Harold, was most police chiefs support some kind of gun control. I'm not sure that's the case, but you can go right to Illinois, where I think it was Pritzker who said that he wanted some kind of limit, and the sheriffs all came out and they said we're not going to make arrests in these cases. But let me just say that it is an issue of enforcement. Now, when he gets up there and he says, I have great respect for gun owners, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. When he says it's a suicide pact, meaning I'm going to be killed because I have guns and somebody else who has guns is going to be killed, I mean, that is not great respect for a gun owner or for the Second Amendment. And in addition to that, it's when he says, I don't know where the gun came from, but we'll find out. Well, I'm not sure you're going to find out, Governor, because you really don't do a lot on the gun trafficking, the sting operations, the enforcement, and the ultimate punishment. You arrest people in your state with guns, right, and then you let them go, and then they get another gun. And you wonder why everybody's got a gun and is killing everyone? There is no effective consequence if you have a gun. And that is the problem. So you can blame that gun, as Greg says, on two little legs that runs out and decides it's going to kill people. And I would venture a guess, because 30 years in law enforcement as a DA, I saw one homicide in a county of 1 million people with a legal gun. We're talking illegal guns. We are not talking about legal gun owners getting involved in these contests, in these shooting contests. And I'm sure the guy who shot and killed in those mass shootings didn't have a legal gun. So that's our problem. You give me the U.S. Attorney's statistics for California, if I could get my hands on them, and I'll show you why they've got a gun problem.
Just for the National Association of Police Organizations, they support an assault weapons ban. So I'm not saying they support all of it, but they support stricter gun. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and as DA, a lot of us did in '93, and then we saw it didn't make a difference.
Interesting. And that's an amazing statistic, 1 out of 30 years. Mm-hmm. Incredible. All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.